Okay, today we have a treat. We have one album that we're going to look at in particular, and an artist, Stephen Arthur Stills. The album is Stephen Stills. This is his premiere album, self-titled. Stephen Stills has sold 35 million records between his solo albums and also his stints with other groups. But let's go back. I want to talk a little bit about his history first. He was born in 1945 in Dallas, Texas. He is kind of famous for one thing in particular. He is the first artist to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice in one night for two separate groups. And that's what we want to talk about first, are the groups. So Stephen Stills, along with 4 Canadians, got together and formed a group that was active from 1966 to 1968. A lot of us have heard the name of it. I did not know that Stephen Stills was part of the group, and that group is Buffalo Springfield. So, a little information on the group. First, the Canadians. So, the 4 Canadians are Dewey Martin was on drums, Bruce Palmer on bass guitar, Richie Furay was on guitar, and there's another name in there too that we might know from another group, was Neil Young, who played guitar, harmonica, the piano, and also was in vocals. So you think about the name Buffalo Springfield, and the first thought was, okay, this is someone probably famous from either U.S. or Canadian history. So I thought, okay, I'm going to look it up. So I looked it up on Wikipedia. No, it's named after a steamroller that was parked outside the house that they were practicing in. So in 1966 to 68, they released 3 albums, and then they disbanded in 1968. So it's a little interesting, and that's one of the things I think especially about this particular album of Stephen Stills is the amazing amount of people that were involved in this album, but also where they went, their histories. But first, again, we want to look at Buffalo Springfield. So if we look at the different people in Buffalo Springfield, we're just going to start with Richie Furay. He started with Stephen Stills in New York City as an go-go singer, which was the house band in a house band in New York City. Then, of course, came Buffalo Springfield, and after Buffalo Springfield, he formed another group with someone called Jim Messina. Oh, wait, we know that name. Loggins and Messina. Jim Messina and Richie Furay formed Poco. Again, news to me. Yes, I've heard of Poco. Did not know who the people involved were. Okay, so let's move on to Neil Young. After Buffalo Springfield, he signed a solo deal with Reprise Records. Now, he was also happened to be friends with Joni Mitchell, and actually they had the same manager. So they were together at Reprise, and then after that, of course, the new band was formed, CSN. I'm going to be referring to them as CSN. If you don't know who CSN is, that's Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And that happened in 1969. Neil Young continued to do solo albums along the way also. Dewey Martin was the drummer, and he went on to Blue Mountain Eagle. And then Bruce Palmer had a short stint as bassist with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and then was eventually deported back to Canada. In the early 80s, these guys performed together a short time with Neil Young, Jim Messina, the guitarist, and the recording engineer for Buffalo Springfield, and Jim Messina was also a producer. So anyway, he went on to co-form Poco with Richie Furay, then began a relationship with Kenny Loggins, and that went until 1972, when they officially changed the name to Loggins and Messina. So that's a quick history of Buffalo Springfield. I would love to show you my Buffalo Springfield collection. I don't have any. They are very sought after, highly collectible, mainly because the group, the people that were in the group went on to be very famous, and so the collectors have snatched up a lot of the albums. So anyway, we're going to go back to Stephen Stills. This album, I can't stress this enough, it is amazing when you go through to see the different people that are involved in this album. The different people, whether they were maybe just background singers, but I'm going to go through and I'm going to read the list. This is amazing, the number of people that are involved in the making of this album. So this is a quiz. Do we know who Rita Coolidge is? Singer-songwriter. What about Priscilla Jones? Name may not be quite as familiar, but I'll give you a hint. Rita Coolidge and Priscilla Jones are sisters. What about John Sebastian? That name I knew. He's a singer-songwriter, has written quite a few songs, but he was with the group too. Can you remember the name of the group? Love and Spoonful. Okay, the next two names I know you should be familiar with, and that's David Crosby and Graham Nash. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Okay, another one. This is played bass. Fuzzy Samuels. Didn't ring a bell with me at first. The Fuzzy kind of stood out, but he also worked with Steve Winwood and America. Another one that really surprised me on this was James Marshall Hendrix. Okay, I don't know who James Marshall Hendrix is. Or maybe we know him better as Jimi Hendrix. If you don't know who Jimi Hendrix is, then you're not a fan of rock and roll. Okay, the next name, Andy Johns. Now, I'm throwing this in there. He was not a singer. He's not a songwriter. He is the sound engineer. So, okay, why did I include the sound engineer? Well, he also was a sound engineer for a couple of other groups. You maybe have never heard of them, called like the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin. Okay, the next name, Cass Elliot. That one I knew. Mama Cass, later to be known in her career as Cass Elliot. Mamas and the Papas. Another name that you should definitely know, Eric Clapton. I don't need to explain Eric Clapton. And then the last one is Claudia Lennear. Maybe not quite as familiar. She sang with Rita Coolidge, Priscilla Jones. Will it help if I tell you that she was an Ikette? If you know what Ikettes were. Ever heard of Ike and Tina Turner? So there we have it. Stephen Stills. Unbelievable amount of talent that's represented on this album, and very, very glad that I've got this in my collection. We're going to be moving on to other groups, other albums. I do have several Manassas, which is also another Stephen Stills, and of course I do have my collection of CSN, later to be Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, don't forget, hit the subscribe button.